Welcome to the Kinetic Sand Lab. In this lab, we will be mixing cooking oil with flour to create our own homemade kinetic sand. Kinetic sand is actually a normal type of sand, but it has one key ingredient, and that would be silicone oil. Silicone oil gives the kinetic sand its harder. It makes it like kind of like sticky. It makes it feel the way it feels. It silicone oil is actually used every day in everyday things. We use it for hand lotion. We use it for car engine oil and so many other things. We use it so much because it has a very specific characteristic, which is that it can act as a semi-solid, a rubbery solid, or even a liquid, depending on the type of pressure you apply to it. We would call this characteristic viscoelasticity. The main reason that silicones are viscoelastic would be because they are a type of polymer, which means they consist of long molecules that can be entangled with their neighbors. Polymers are a substance with a molecular structure consisting mainly or entirely of large amount of similar units bonded together. They are typically macromolecules, which are multiples of simpler chemical units known as monomers. They play a key role in living organisms. They are a part of cellulose, proteins, and even nucleic acids. And they can, a fun fact actually, is that they can exist naturally or be created synthetically. So the first synthetic polymer was actually created in 1869 because at the time there was a lot of controversy over over ivory, which was actually created from elephant tusks at the time, and that was like a huge thing. Was like, is it moral or not to be taking elephant tusks and making them ivory, which was used for ornaments at the time. So a New York firm offered $10,000 to anyone that could create a substitute for ivory. So John Wesley Hyatt, who was a scientist, he actually created a synthetic polymer, which we now know today as plastic, and it was huge at the time because humans were no longer limited to nature's kind of elements. We had our own plastic is huge. We use it every day, and it was just at the time it was just huge because we could finally have a substitute, and plastic was even more probably more effective anyway. Overall, in this experiment, we will be working with cooking oil, and we will be mixing it into the flour. We will have another flour as our control group in the experiment. And my hypothesis would be that the more cooking oil we add to the bowl of flour, the more sticky and moldable it will become. Because I think it will be kind of acting like the silicone oil in this experiment, like the silicone oil does with kinetic sand. The independent variable will be the amount of cooking oil we add to the flour, and I think the dependent variable will be the texture of the sand or of the flour after we are done mixing it. Overall, I think this lab is going to be very interesting, and let's get started. So right now we can see that we have our 2 bowls of flour, 1 cup of flour is in each bowl. We can examine the texture right now. Overall, it feels pretty normal. I wouldn't say it's anything like kinetic sand at all. I would say it's more more just it's kind of sticky, not really. It's like it doesn't it feels kind of like sand, but if the sand had a kind of stickiness to it, I wouldn't say that it's anything I would say it's basically it's flour. I wouldn't say it feels kind of normal. If I rub it together, I think it can kind of take shape a little bit, maybe a little, but I wouldn't say anything like kinetic sand at all. So now I'm going to wash my hands, and we will begin adding cooking oil to the mix. All right, so now I have thoroughly washed and dried my hands, and now we are going to begin adding cooking oil to the flour. I'm going to slowly add one cup. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, 1 cup of cooking oil to the flour, and then we're going to mix it in with a fork. All right, so we're gonna gently put it in, and now we are going to mix until there are no big clumps of flour, and we cannot see the cooking oil. All right, so yeah, we're just gonna keep mixing this. Right now, I don't know. I know I can't see the cooking oil at all, but there are some big clumps of flour left. So we're just gonna keep mixing, So once we finish this, we will be adding a second tablespoon to the same bowl of flour, and then we're gonna use our fork to stir some more. Okay. Currently I don't see any cooking oil. I would say that there are some big clumps of flour, but overall I wouldn't say it's anything crazy. Yeah, and then I would say that there are no big clumps of flour, so I'm going to take the fork and I'm going to rub all of this stuff off. Oh, wait, we have some more cooking oil. Okay, so now that we've mixed that in, I can't see any of the oil. There may be a few big clumps of flour. I'm not really sure. But I don't think I'm going to change it by, mixing anything. So we're gonna add another tablespoon of cooking oil to the experiment. All right, hold on. Let me get this. All right, and we're gonna slowly add it to the flour. All right, so now that we have that, we can begin mixing again. Okay. It feels let me see. It feels a little different, I will say. But we gotta make sure that there are no clumps of flour or anything. So keep mixing it. All right. Yeah. As you can see, I'm trying to get rid of all these clumps of flour now, because now they're popping up. Pretty frequently, actually. Yeah, alright, so after this we will examine the texture of the flour. I'm not sure if it's going to feel any different necessarily, because I'm not sure. We'll see how it feels. But right now, currently, I would say it feels at least a little different. We gotta make sure that there are no clumps, though. This is interesting. I'm gonna add another maybe half tablespoon to the mix just to see what would happen. Now we're gonna mix again. Okay. Oh, now I'm starting to see stuff. Okay. This is getting good now. Alright. So I can see... Now I can kind of feel it with my fork, the texture a little bit of the mixture. It's actually starting to feel kind of like kinetic sand a little bit. At least compared to the flour, the regular flour that I was feeling. Let's see. Oh yeah, there are a lot of large clumps, so that's the problem. But I think once we get rid of those large clumps, I think it's gonna look a lot better. Alright, so I'm going to mix the flour in for a bit longer, and then I will be back to examine the results. Alright, so I have now finished. I've now finished placing and mixing all the cooking oil into the flour. and I can tell, you know, it's not as the best results I wanted, but you can tell, you know, it's definitely holding shape. I expected it to be a little bit more, feel a little bit more different, a little different, but I mean, you can tell it is holding shape. I think that these results could have been different because I used olive oil rather than something like canola oil or a different cooking oil, so maybe that could have been the reason for this. And also, I think that was probably be the main reason. But I mean, you can tell that it's definitely holding shape. A lot more than the flour would be. Maybe also because this is not it doesn't feel exactly like kinetic sand because this is you know, it's not a type of it's not silicone oil, which would be, I think that would be a lot different in this experiment if it were actually silicone oil. But texture wise right now, it feels it can definitely hold a shape, I would say. I would say that it does quickly fall apart. You know, if all right, I'll take a big amount of flour here, and I'll squish it together. I mean, you can tell it. I mean, but if I you know, just barely, I can rip it apart. But I would say that it holds shape, not as well as kinetic sand, but I would say it honestly, it kind of feels a little bit, how it holds shape wise, it kind of feels like a snowball almost. Like, you know, I'm gonna hold it and it's going to stay like this, right? Until something hits it, or you know, until it has contact with something. That's what it feels like. So, I think, and it does stick to the bowl a little bit. As I can tell, I'm basically ripping it off the sides here. But yeah, I think it's not exactly what I expected for the results, but I think that overall, it did not disappoint. I think you can definitely tell that it's definitely holding a shape, especially when we compare it to what it was before, and when we will be comparing it to the control group in a minute. Yeah, I would say the best comparison would be kind of like snow. Like it honestly, it feels like snow. Like if I were to make a ball out of it real quick, it feels like it's going to hold this shape. It's going to, but I think it kind of has like the same like stability almost as you would say a snowball has. So yeah, definitely sticking to the edge. Yeah, not exactly what I expected, but definitely a different texture than when we first started out. So now we have evaluated and we've examined, you know, our kinetic sand, our homemade kinetic sand. Now what I want to do is I want to compare it to the control group of normal flour. So our kinetic sand, as we went over, kind of like a snowball, able to hold shape. It didn't actually, believe it or not, it didn't stick to my hands as much as I originally expected. It kind of sucked together a little bit. Not a lot ended up on my hands. So we'll see. I'm interested to see what the flour is like. As you can see, definitely not sticking to the side of the bowl at all. Oh, definitely very getting on my hands here. If I take a shape and I hold it, you know, it'll take a little bit of a shape. I don't know if you can see that, like a little clump, but it is not nowhere near the kinetic sand that we made at all. As you can see, it's you know, it'll hold a little bit of shape, very sticking to my hands, shockingly. Yeah, it's overall not sticking to the bowl. I don't think it can hold a shape for longer than a couple seconds. Yeah, I would say that this is not at all close to the texture of the kinetic sand or the flour mixed with olive oil. Yeah, if we were to just take this over here and even squeeze it, I think it would look a lot different than what this looks like. Yeah, I think it sticks a lot less to my hands than the original flour. Definitely, I think we can assume. But let me see. What I am interested, I want to try to take a lot of it and squeeze it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we can see that it definitely does form a little thing, or I guess you could say, but a big thing. But it doesn't hold shape at all. I would say that the flour mixed with olive oil, it held shape for, I would argue, until it had contact with something, or until something would rip it apart. But I think it actually has like a time. I think you could probably make a time for how long this would hold together, and it's not long at all. It's until my hand lets go of the flour, it just breaks apart. So I think yeah. So I think in total we can conclude that the kinetic sand was definitely held together way more, and was much more moldable than the flour. All right. So to conclude this experiment, we can definitely observe that the kinetic sand, or the flour we mixed with olive oil, is definitely a lot different than the flour without olive oil. We can tell that the olive oil definitely acted as a silicone oil in this experiment, and it really helped it hold shape, you know, definitely for a very long time. While the flour kind of broke apart immediately. Differences wise, we can tell definitely just based off of the color, what the kind of, like, the flour is, you know, very white. This is more of a yellowish kind of color, and you know, the flour didn't stick to the bowl. The kinetic sand did. Overall, I'm not, to be honest, I'm actually very shocked with these results, because I expected the kinetic sand to be a lot more able to hold shape. You know, if I, like, right now, I can probably take it and, you know, make a shape out of it, and it'll hold. But I was expecting, you know, a lot. I was expecting, you know, really holding shape, like, almost like, not, I don't want to say Play-Doh, but kind of like that. Well, and it wasn't exactly how I imagined it turning out. And I expected the flour actually to be able to hold a little bit of shape, while it wasn't really at all. The flour was very surprising, because it didn't hold shape at all. The flour, for some reason, was actually stickier, like, to my hands, and what I was using. The flour got all over my hands, while the kinetic sand kind of stayed with itself, which I found very surprising, because I thought that, you know, if we add a silicone oil, or in this case olive oil, to the flour, I expected it to get really sticky and, like, stick to my hands, but it wasn't like that at all. I think maybe because it was kind of clumping together, you know. Like, I can actually touch it now, it really doesn't get on me, maybe a little bit here. But if I touch the flour, it's getting all over my hand. I just found that very shocking. But I guess it makes sense in the end, because this is more clumping together, while the flour is really just all over the place. It's not in a specific, it's not sticking together with each other, like the kinetic sand is. But overall, I think this experiment was definitely a success. I think the results were a little not what I expected, but I think I definitely learned a lot, and overall, I think it was a very fun experiment to do, and I hope we get to do these more in the future.